Kia ora and welcome. We're going to start on this blackboard now. We're getting into the nitty gritty now. This is how you're going to see how we're starting to shape and form the brain and the skills of learning so that as we progress through the years, we'll transfer off this blackboard and around the corner and onto the next blackboard and show what spits out at the other end. It's quite exciting, and I truly believe that those of us who are educating our children at home, and we're making that choice to educate our children at home, it's because we're understanding each of these stages and knowing what we can do to maximize the learning at each of these stages so that what pops out the other end is just incredible. So let's have a look at this blackboard as a whole before we get started. We're starting down here. It starts after play-based kindergarten. That's what this says, play-based kindy. So there's an expectation that children have just been allowed to be little, up to about the age of 6. They just explore and they climb and they make mud pies and they copy what you're doing and they just play, and their learning is playing and experimenting and experiencing life. Then, once the baby milk teeth start to fall out and that energy is moving out of the body and now into the head, we are now ready to start that more formal academic education. And so we've split our program deliberately into pockets of education. We've got our classes 1 to 3, what we call our foundation years, usually around about the years of 6 to 8. Some start earlier at 5, but predominantly it's around about the years of 6 to 8 that we're in these foundational years. And they have some particular styles of learning, skills to learn in particular ways of teaching and learning. Once we've completed those, we move forward and through into what we call our middle school, classes 4 and 5, which is sort of that 9 to 11-year-old period. And they have a completely different skill set and a different styles of learning and thinking. And then we'll go after middle school through to the intermediate years, classes 6 and 7. These are our 12 to 14-year-olds, and they have another completely different way of learning and educating and experiencing the world. And after them, we'll shoot off to our meaningful learners, our classes 8 and 9. This is the first 2 years of secondary school around the corner. We'll go to that shortly. And they're on their way to a different kind of learning before they release off out into the workforce and become business owners or workers or whatever it is that they're going to do. Now, we're going to harken back to the stages of learning from that previous video, where we have prior knowledge and we have to learn some new skill and it's really in our head and we have to think about it lots and lots and lots. Then we have to do hundreds of hours of practice. And only after we've done hundreds of hours of practice can we then do the next stage of going, it's in us now, free up our thinking and make some really good tweaks before we go on to the next bit of learning. So each one of these has that 3-step process. Then when we've mastered that, we move to the next level. Then we do that 3-step process again. Then we've mastered that, we move to the next level. We do that 3-step process again, and then we do it again. So I'm going to keep reminding you time and time again that learning takes time and practice, and to learn a new skill is a lot of repetition. When you're learning to drive that car, you don't master it in a week. It takes hundreds of hours behind that wheel for you to become a really safe and competent and effective driver with full observational skills, who just knows all of those road rules. You don't become an Olympic athlete just because you've learned to swim. It's those hundreds or thousands of hours in the pool before you become that experienced. And so we have to remember that it takes those hours at each stage before we can advance. So let's not hurry our kids. There seems to be this new modern thing as we're trying to zip them through as fast as we can. And it's like they need to know all these subjects at the age of 6. No, they don't need to know all of those subjects. They'll get to those subjects. There's some core things that they need to know at the age of 6, and it's going to take years to build them and do the practice before we go through to the next level. And this is what the scientists, the educational experts are saying. This is how the human being thinks. So stop trying to bombard them with 40 million new things when they're little. Give them time. It takes time. So let's look at this. We've got different kinds of learning going in. We start quite heavily at the lower end, the classes 1 to 3 in the foundation years with our babies, with teacher-led learning. But it needs to change over time. From teacher-led learning, we're gradually handing over the power, we're gradually handing over the control, and we're getting more and more towards child-led learning. And then once we've finished with intermediate and into the secondary school, we've got a couple of years there on meaningful learning, and then popping out the other end from there is a completely autonomous learner. And that's where we're heading. So it's different styles of learning. What does teacher-led learning look like? Some people might have called it rote learning in the past. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's where the teacher is providing all direction, because we have to remember that some of the core skills in these junior ends are things like, what are the letters of the alphabet? What are my numbers and sounds to build all the words? We've got basic reading and writing. We need to learn the 4 processes of plus, minus, times, divide, those core foundations. We've got to learn habits of being a learner. And our fine motor skills, our cutting and our ruling and our gluing and our knitting and our stitching and our making. And there's a lot of muscle stuff going on in fine motor skills at this end. Habit forming, fine motor skills, and core foundations. Because remember, when we first start, things are just squiggles. Those lines are just squiggles. They're not a word or a letter or a number. We have to learn to associate all of those squiggles and memorize all of those squiggles and understand that those squiggles have a meaning, and then we start to put squiggles together. Suddenly a squiggle becomes an actual letter or a number, and it has a sound or an amount, and when we start manipulating it in different ways, we can work with it. These are our core foundation years, and it takes the hundreds of hours of practice in these years to free that up. And by the time we're ready to step out of the foundation years, we can hear sounds, somebody can speak to us, we can write something, those squiggles are now forming words and sentences, we can be given some objects and some quantities, and we can manipulate them, we can add them to make them bigger, we can subtract them to make them smaller, we can multiply them for quick addition, we can share them out evenly, and we're understanding how to work and manipulate these basic numbers. Now we're ready, we've done our thinking stage, we've done our hundreds of hours of practice, and now we've got it! Jump us to the next level. Fantastic. So now we'll jump to middle school. Classes 4 and 5, those 9 to 11 years old. When we arrive in middle school, we can do all of our basic, our reading and our writing and our spelling and our counting. We've got our foundations sorted. Now the teacher can back off just a little bit. It's not fully teacher-led now. Now the child is allowed to start having a little bit more freedom of expression for us. So when we're writing a story, we're writing it in our own words. We don't have to copy the teacher's story anymore because we've mastered that. We can write our own story, and if we want to change the ending and make it more exciting, we can. And if we want to make our maths a little bit more alive, we can. We're becoming a little bit more independent now, and We still need some more hundreds of hours to consolidate those basic reading, writing, spelling, counting skills. We still need more hours to consolidate those. But our reading and our writing and various things are getting progressively more challenging. We are starting to understand that we don't just randomly read and write. There's rules around this stuff. There's spelling rules, and there's grammar rules, and there's comprehension rules, and there's all sorts of things going on there. How to make a paragraph, and things need to flow a certain way, and if I'm doing this kind of writing, it needs to look like this, and for a brochure, and if I'm doing this kind of writing, it's recount, and it needs to look like this, and if I'm doing some poetry writing, it's different, and it needs to look like this, and there's rules and things around stuff now. I'm taking all of my skills that I learned in the foundation years, I'm applying them here. There's a lot more individual work now. I can take a lot more control of what I'm doing. And we're broadening, of course, all of our math subjects. It's no longer just your plus, minus, times, divide. Now we're getting into fractions and decimals and percentages and graphing, and there's all sorts of these other new maths arriving now. It's quite an exciting part to be in. And during the entire time while all of this is going on, we are doing some development of the early executive functioning skills. I'm going to be talking about that over into the secondary part when we really get into talking about the executive functioning skills. But know that we're starting to develop some executive functioning skills at this point. Now, we've done hundreds of hours of practice. We've learned it all new. We've done hundreds of hours of practice. We're ready to jump forward to the next level. Take us up to intermediate now. The teacher lets go even more. Hands more power over to the child. We're now way more child-led than we were. But the teacher doesn't abandon the child. We're not ready for autonomous learning yet. What we're starting to do now is we've got a really good understanding now of reading and writing and spelling and counting, and we know how to write in different ways, and we know how to manipulate numbers, and we know how to produce all of that work now. We need to apply that work somewhere. All that learning that we've been doing for the previous 5 years, we now really need to start applying to something meaningful. So we call this learning reception learning. Some call it discovery learning, but they're a bit different. Reception learning is where the teacher still provides and organises the resources and various things in a easy to follow, well laid out format. The child is still doing all of their own research and their own projects and their own work, but the teacher has provided the environment for them to enable them to do that. Discovery learning, you're pretty much on your own, baby. Just go and learn that by yourself and come back to me with what you've got. We tend not to do just too much discovery learning at this point because what I find is they're still needing, they want to do a lot of project, they want to do a lot of freedom learning, but they're still needing to be held where their resources and stuff are made available for them so that they can do it that way. So there's lots of project-based learning, but the teacher will give a broad topic. It could be the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. That's a massive topic. You could pick anything from the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. You could be mapping it. You could be doing Hannibal going over the Alps and the war elephants. You could be doing the life of women or children. You could be doing the political systems. You could be doing how it affected the countries that they took over. You could be doing all the different religions. You could be doing, this epoch spans 1,000 years. You could be doing the gladiators. The scope is enormous, but it's all held within we're studying the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and you're all going to report back and you're all going to have a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And when we put all 30 of those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, we hear these incredible stories of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, but told from 30 different students, from 30 different viewpoints, using their creativity and finding out what ignited their passions. You know, people can be building working trebuchets and ballistas and explaining the physics behind it as they fire rocks across the backfield. You know, they could be building full weaponry, boats, model boats. There's so much that could come out of it. But reception learning means we still step them through and help provide their resources and stuff. And again, as we learn this, we're developing executive functioning skills, which I will go into. So they're learning how to research, how to scan information, how to skim it and scan it and highlight what they need. They're learning about plagiarism and copyright, things like that. They have to discern the content. Who was the source of this? Where did I get this information from? Can I really trust this? There's a lot more creativity and innovation as they really delve into how am I going to feed back this knowledge that I've acquired. They've got to be taking a lot more responsibility now for getting the job done within a set time frame and meeting certain criterias, and how to present things from different viewpoints, not just from one viewpoint, and this persuading others to your cause, which is quite different to the type of, because there's lots of different styles of writing that we teach over the years, and recount writing and descriptive writing and explanation writing and instructional writing. By the time you're getting up to here, this persuasive writing, this is a whole nother aspect of cognitive brain thinking that's now coming on. And there's lots of, but why? Don't just tell me. Let me discover for myself, but why? Can you see how that's a very different set of years of learning, than these years? But you can't do these ones until you've first done your hundreds of hours of practice of these ones. Does that make sense? Fantastic. After we've done these intermediate years, class 6 and 7, we're heading towards meaningful learning. We're going towards classes 8 and 9, which are the early secondary, and that's a whole different kind of learning, which requires its own hundreds of hours over a couple of years to master. Let's go there and see what that one looks like.